to Spirituality and the Self. Thank you for joining us. This, of course, is a project of the Multi-Faith Center at the University of Toronto, and we want to welcome all of our listeners at U of T and beyond. This episode is going to be the first in a series of interviews on the topic of religious identity. The idea here is to get to know people who fit different labels that we might have heard about, to get to know them as individuals rather than as members of that label or as stereotypes of how we might think of that label. We're here to entertain and to inform people about what kinds of experiences these people have, and also to give everybody a chance to listen and understand diverse perspectives and ideas that are out there directly from the people who experience them. Today's topic is going to be a bit of a controversial one of sorts. It's going to be the topic of interfaith marriage and how it affects children. Now, you know that obviously people have very strong feelings and very strong opinions on this, and they have their reasons for doing so on all sides. But our purpose here is merely to give someone who's been in that situation, namely the child of an interfaith couple, the chance to explain what it's like to be in that position. And hopefully we can all learn something and gain some understanding into what this is like, and use that to develop our own opinions in a more serious way, and in a way that takes what we learn here into account. And in order to do that, we have an excellent guest here, and that guest is none other than fashion blogger, rising social media star, founder of Dying in Dior, Miss Taryn Potasky, who herself is a student, and therefore someone that hopefully many of us can relate to. And I was fortunate enough to sit down with Taryn earlier this week and have a conversation about this topic. I hope you all enjoy listening to what she had to say. To the inaugural interview for our new podcast, and our first guest today is a very special one. It's fashion blogger and social media influencer Taryn Potasky. She's here so we can get to know her a little bit better, and this will be the first installment in our series on religious identities, where we're going to get to know ordinary people in a different way than what the public would usually get to see. So thanks for being here, Taryn.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. It's my pleasure. So tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So I am a fashion blogger. I started a blog called Dying in Dior when I was 16, and it was just kind of a creative outlet for me to share what I was wearing and what different outfits and trends I was inspired by at the time. And currently it's more of an Instagram-based blog. But yeah, that's what I'm doing.
All right. And are you in school right now? Are you working? Tell us a bit more about your life.
I am. I'm in school right now for communications. I'm in my third year, and I also work in retail, and I have an internship as well for a jewelry company doing social media.
Right. That's very good. And what do you hope to do in the future?
So my hope is to go more into fashion. My ultimate goal would be to be a celebrity stylist. I think that'd be so cool, but I'm also interested in PR and marketing, buying, stuff like that.
Sounds good to me. So, as you know, we're here to talk not only about fashion, which we'll get into a bit later, but we're also here to get to know you a bit better, and as I said, to maybe get to see the personal side of you that the public might not get a chance to see too often. So, why don't we start off by just having you tell us a bit about your upbringing?
So I was raised here in Thornhill, and I have one sister, and my parents it's an interfaith marriage, so my dad's Jewish, my mom is Catholic, and yeah, I was raised here, went to Hebrew school here, and we just recently moved into Toronto.
Well, what was the hardest part about that move?
I don't know that there was a hard part for me. I mean, it was kind of weird, I guess, because it was the house that I grew up in, really. But I was pretty happy to move into the city and just be closer to downtown Toronto.
I see. Are there any major differences between the community you're living in now and the one you used to live in growing up?
Major differences. Well, I felt like in Vaughan, everyone kind of knew each other one way or another, and it was a less diverse group. We were kind of with a lot of Jewish people. That's the main reason why we moved to Vaughan in the beginning, was because my parents, just since they were going to raise us Jewish, they wanted us to have more Jewish friends and just be near a Jewish school.
I see. And so let's just talk a bit more about that. So you say that they wanted to raise you primarily Jewish. So
yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that? Was that a conscious decision, or was it a matter of discussion or anything like that?
It was definitely a decision they made when they got married. It was important to my dad that we be raised Jewish because it's such a small community. And so, yeah, it was a decision they made when they got married that they would convert my sister and I and they would raise us Jewish. But we still take part in, like, celebrating some of the Catholic holidays, like Christmas. We still do. We just hosted our first Christmas this year and got a tree and everything. But we also celebrate the Jewish holidays and go to synagogue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Would you describe either yourself or your parents as particularly religious, or is your involvement in these religions more of another kind of involvement?
We're not religious at all, really. We just do synagogue twice a year for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We don't keep kosher or anything, but we still identify our religion and take part in holidays and things like that.
So do you think that has any effect on your family's ability to function together? Do you think it might be harder if maybe one of your parents was more say observant about and more demanding in terms of their religious beliefs, that it might be harder for your situation to work?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I feel like my dad is maybe more into his religion than my mom is, or at least into making us observe our religion more. I guess my mom doesn't really have much of a say in that because we're not her religion, so it's not something she's that invested in, I guess. But, like, we had a wedding on Yom Kippur this year, and he didn't want us to go, but me and my sister went anyways, and he didn't. So, but I'm guessing if he was more into it, yes, things would be harder.
But what you're saying is that although your parents come from different religious backgrounds, they've clearly identified one faith which you guys choose to follow.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. So that's not something that I imagine every person in your situation is fortunate enough to have. I feel like a lot of people probably have a tension sometimes, right, between if they're not clearly defined in one group or another. But I guess you've been able to avoid that problem, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know some families who have one parent who's a different religion than what the majority of the family is, and that parent doesn't really partake in their religion anymore. Like, they kind of assimilate.
Would you say that there are any major challenges involved in coming from an interfaith background?
Any major challenges? Not really.
Either socially or in terms of belief. Do you ever find any trouble fitting in or anything like that as a result of this?
No. I mean, one thing that's, like, it's not a challenge, but it's something that comes up a lot is, like, oh, like, are you gonna do Christmas with your kids when you're older because you did that at home? And are you gonna marry someone from the same religion as you? Or does it matter to you? Stuff like that.
I see. So how do you feel about those things?
Well, I told my mom I probably wouldn't be doing Christmas at my house if I marry someone Jewish, which is, I don't know how much I care about the religion of who I marry, but I was just like, if I marry someone Jewish, I'm not gonna do Christmas. Like, I'll do Christmas with her family, but not in my own house.
Fair enough. So while we're on the topic of Christmas, why don't you just describe what the holidays are like in your house?
Well, it's very busy because since there's two religions in my house, there's holidays all the time. But as I mentioned before, we just did Christmas at our house, which was just shortly after Hanukkah. So for 8 days we did the candles and everything, and then we were setting up for Christmas, which was an interesting experience because we've never done the tree before or anything like that. So yeah, it can kind of be like, it's fun but busy.
I see. Do you have a favorite holiday?
As a Jewish woman, my favorite holiday is Christmas.
Wow. Okay, I guess that's a compliment to all you Christmas celebrators out there.
It's the most fun.
What advice would you give to someone who's maybe struggling in a similar situation or a similar background to you?
The advice I would give to someone else in a similar situation would be to not feel like you have to give in to the pressure of partaking in one religion more than another. I think if you're in an interfaith home, it's natural to want to experiment with the other religion and just kind of see what it's like. And I think that if that's something you want to do, then that's fair.
So speaking about this temptation to explore the other religion, did you ever explore Christianity as you were growing up?
No, I never did. I never really had an interest really in doing that. It was more my sister who was interested in I don't know if she wanted to explore it to the point where she would start identifying as Christian or anything, but she's always been interested in going to church for midnight mass on Christmas Eve, and that's something she's always kind of been interested in doing. And she doesn't always have the support of everybody doing that, but I think she has the right to do that, as anybody does.
And how do you feel that your background has helped shape you as a person?
I think it's definitely made me well-rounded and open-minded in the sense that I grew up in a more diverse environment than people who are all one religion would. It's allowed me to see just how the different cultures live and how they're dynamic.
So since the topic of struggles has come up a bit here, or at least the topic of criticism, would you feel that there are any common criticisms of intermarriage that you feel are legitimate and that people in the situation should try and find a way to address?
Any legitimate fears?
Yeah.
Not really. It's only really an issue if one or both people are religious and have to convert for one another, and if they want to, then they'll work that out and do that. But I know that it was an issue when my parents got married. My dad and me and my sister were actually kicked out of a synagogue in Toronto for being in an interfaith marriage.
Your family got kicked out? Could you elaborate?
So we weren't physically kicked out during a service or anything. It was just, I think, we went to renew our membership and they said, sorry, no, you're in an interfaith marriage and we don't support that. So my dad was not able to rejoin.
Really?
Yeah.
So you do from time to time face some pushback from communities,
so
I
there's
guess.
definitely criticism, but
I see. But you feel that...
there shouldn't be.
Fair enough. So you feel that most of the criticism is unjustified?
Yes.
How do you feel that your background, be it in the religion in which you were raised or in the interfaith background, how do you feel that what you've been presented with as religion has shaped your identity and how you think of yourself as a person?
That's a good question. Well, I feel like because I went to Hebrew school, I grew up with all Jewish kids and all just other Jewish people rather than a mix of different people from being in a public school or anything like that. So I feel like that's really sort of shaped your identity because you get into like the Jewish way of thinking, because I feel like there really is such a cultural difference in between different religions, because they're all with each other and they see how each other communicates, and then you start doing the same thing. So I feel like even though, I don't know, I feel like that's made me more Jewish, being in a Jewish school and growing up with Jewish people.
How has all this created an identity for you, or how does it relate to your overall identity of who you are, if you feel that it does?
I mean, I guess it does. I don't know how different I would be, though, if I grew up Catholic rather than Jewish. But I would know all different people and everything, so I'm sure that makes a huge difference in shaping who you are.
I'm sure it does.
And different experiences.
Is there any part of your experience that you feel like someone who hasn't come from a similar background might not be aware of, that you would want to tell us about?
Off the top of my head? No.
That comes to mind? Okay, fair enough. How does this aspect of your background affect your relationship with other members of your extended family?
It only affects it to the extent that people have a lot of questions sometimes. They ask, more so on the Catholic side, because I guess Catholic traditions are so highly publicized in the media and everything, so people kind of know about them regardless. But yeah, a lot of the time on the Catholic side, people will be like, oh, do you know any Hebrew? Can you say anything to me? Or like, what do you do on this holiday? What's like a popular Jewish food? What is that? I've heard of matzo ball soup, but what is matzah? And like, why do you celebrate Passover? It's just a lot of questions. Everyone's curious. But I come from a very open family, open-minded, so nobody's opposed to it, really.
And are you ever bothered by the questions, or do you enjoy answering them?
I'm never bothered by them. I just, honestly, a lot of the time I don't even know the answers myself.
Do you have any stories that you can share about when this has been maybe an issue as you were growing up?
An issue for myself personally?
Yeah.
I mean, in Hebrew school, a lot of the kids were kind of confused by my background and would be like, you're not really Jewish, like, who do you think you are saying you're Jewish when you weren't born Jewish, like, you can't be converted, that's not real, God won't see you as Jewish, stuff like that. That's the only problem, and I don't know that I'd really even consider it a problem. Kind of just
doesn't bother you?
Dealt with it, yeah.
Did it ever have an effect on how you related to the Jewish community or the Jewish religion? Or how you viewed it?
I don't know if I'm as connected to my religion as other Jewish kids are. But I don't know if that's just because of my background, or if that's just the way I would be either way.
Do you have any fond memories you'd like to share about celebrating any particular holidays over the years?
I mean, it's not a holiday, but my bat mitzvah was like, that was interesting because so many people, the majority of the people who were there, my mom comes from a really big family. She has 10 siblings. It was all of their first time in a synagogue and at a bat mitzvah, so that was fun. That was different.
How did they take to it?
They had so much fun. I don't think they were expecting it to be so much like a wedding and such a party.
So let's talk a bit more about your other interests. So people know you as a fashion blogger. So how did your interest in fashion start?
Oh, I've always been interested in fashion, but I knew when I was 9 years old, and I knew it was actually Shabbat dinner. And I was sitting talking to my aunt, and she was just saying, what do you want to do when you're older, and stuff like that. And I never really knew as a kid. Obviously, I always flip-flopped with what I wanted to do, just like every other kid does. But then she was saying, well, you seem to really like fashion, so why don't you do that? And I was like, that's a job, you can do that? And she was like, yeah. And then ever since then, I just knew that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I've been headed.
You mentioned earlier that you started blogging as a creative outlet of sorts, so why don't you tell us a bit about how that started and how it developed?
Literally I'm a little bit impulsive, and so I literally just decided one night, why not start a blog? I mean, I'll put as much effort into it as I feel and whatever and just see what happens. And so I just spent, I think, 6 hours or something one night just in my room developing this website using Blogspot and creating it and how it's going to look. And I launched it the next day and just made a post saying what's to come. And people started reading it, mostly from Facebook. And then I started an Instagram account and just started posting everything there to get more followers and views. And then slowly but surely, people started reading the blog from all around the world. And then I hired a web developer to just create an entirely new look for my website. And then as time went on, I just got so busy with school and work, and I just put the blog on the back burner and kind of focused more on Instagram, because I feel like that's where people really care to look more anyways, rather than reading a long post. So yeah, I'm still up on Instagram. I have a couple brand partnerships that I'm working on, so that's fun.
So what would you say is the best part of blogging, or at least the part that you enjoy the most?
Well, it's creative, and it's all you. I mean, nobody's really telling you what to do or anything, so you really just get to be yourself and do what you feel is best for you and see if other people like it, and a lot of the time they do.
Do you have anything you want to say to any of your followers or fans who might be listening to this?
Thanks for following me. I hope you like everything that's on the Instagram these days.
All right, so since you're obviously well up on fashion, so let me ask you a couple of your thoughts on fashion trends right now. What do you think? What do you think is the most interesting fashion trend going on today?
Well, the 80s are kind of making a comeback, and I don't know how I feel about it totally, because I've always hated 80s fashion, but it's starting to look like it's kind of fun, so I'm excited to see where that goes. But yeah, the 90s are happening, 80s, we're in the past.
If you could introduce one fashion trend that would catch on, what would it be?
Oh, it's such a good question. I mean, I would love for, it's not like something new, but I would love for the 50s and 60s to come back and like big dresses and hair all done up and everything like that. I like glamour.
I don't blame you for picking that. I think it's a pretty fun looks over there.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in particular that you kind of look up to as your fashion role model?
I really love Olivia Palermo's style. She's a New York City socialite, and I just think her style is so fun. There's always a lot going on, but not too much, and it's creative and fun and feminine. But I also, just like every other girl these days, love the Kardashians, especially Kendall and Kim right now. I love their style. But then I also love looking back on like old movies and stuff like that and getting inspiration from Audrey Hepburn or Grace Kelly.
Taryn, it's funny you should mention that, because from what I understand, you're quite the socialite yourself here in Toronto. You've been known to be at parties with some pretty high-profile people, right? You want to tell us some of the people that you've been to parties with lately?
I don't know if I'd go as far as to call myself a socialite, but I've been to some fun parties. I was at one a few years ago. I was working at it, helping a photographer, but it was a TIFF party, and Jessica Chastain was there, Chloe Grace Moretz, Richard Gere came and left because nobody was there to greet him at the door. Denzel Washington was there. There were other people too. And then just recently, 2 years ago I think it was, I was at the Canadian Art and Fashion Awards, and Sophie Trudeau was there, so that was really cool. Carly Kloss, big supermodel, she was there, spoke to her, super nice. And then I didn't even realize it at the time, but Meghan Markle was there, so that was fun. But I didn't know who she was at the time.
Sounds like some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it was exciting.
As long as we've had this whole conversation about identities, do you feel like your identities come together in some way, like all of this fashion and religious background have any kind of connection into how you feel about yourself?
Other than that, there's actually a lot of Jewish people in fashion. I don't really know if I could think of a way that they directly connect.
Well, if our listeners would like to follow you and get to know you a bit better and get to follow your work, where can they do that?
So they can find me on Instagram. My Instagram name is Dying in Dior, which is the same as my blog name. So I should come up that way, or you can just search my full name, which is Taryn Potasky on Instagram.
Sounds good. I hope you all check her out and give her a follow. And we really appreciate Taryn being here today and sharing such personal ideas with us. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it. And we hope you'll come back again soon.
Thanks for having me on the show.
And there you have it, folks. That was my interview with rising social media star and fashion blogger Taryn Potasky. Hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure and check out her blog and Instagram. As we said, Taryn is the founder of Dying in Dior, and we hope you'll check those out. Now, one thing that really surprised me in speaking to Taryn this afternoon was that she seemed to strongly identify with one faith over the other, which I wasn't expecting. You know, you often assume, this might just be a stereotype, but we often assume that people who come from mixed backgrounds would have some kind of tension or uncertainty about which side they're from, but it seems like in Taryn's case, that's not what happened. This may be typical or maybe not. I'd be happy to hear what some of you out there think about this. But it was clear that for Taryn, it's safe to say that she definitely defied some of the expectations that some of us might have had about someone and her identity, which goes to show you that everyone is truly an individual, which is really what the purpose of this show is. It's to get to know people as individuals rather than as labels and as whatever we might think of them as if we didn't get to know them well, like we got to know Taryn this afternoon, and like hopefully we'll get to know our future guests. So I hope you enjoyed this first installment, this first interview, and Darcy and I look forward to seeing you again next week.